I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Tim Farrell and Marc Smith, sound editors and designers on Moon Knight. Mac, you've got 6 episodes to choose from on this show. There's so much to choose from because this show is so electric and engaging. And for a sound person, like I just can't imagine how much work was involved. So talk me through the episode that you decided to submit for Emmy consideration this year.
Well, it was a hard choice because all the episodes are so different and had different sound challenges, but ultimately we settled with the series finale, episode 6, called Gods and Monsters, simply just because there's so much going on in that episode. That's where the big bad character who they talk about through the whole series is finally revealed, Amit, and there's a lot of magic. There's a lot of creature stuff. There's so much action. It's probably the most fighting between all the characters in that episode compared to the others too. So we thought that made sense to submit that episode.
Yeah. I mean, it really just completely encompasses, a lot of the work we built in earlier episodes. We were able to then include in this because a lot of the material, such as like the Moon Knight suit and a lot of things like that, also were appearing, and we were able to. It really represented kind of our full body of work for the show.
Yeah. Guys, I really want to talk about Moon God Khonshu because I was so looking forward to seeing how he was going to be realized on screen. And he's so visually imposing and intimidating, right? That's a given. But when he starts speaking, his voice, I couldn't get it out of my head. It's so booming, but it's also extremely layered and really complicated. And for a layperson like myself, I have no idea how you're able to achieve that. So perhaps maybe Tim, if you could start with talking us through what the process was of getting that right, and then we'll hear from Mac as well on that.
I'd be happy to start, but it really was Mac's baby, so he should take the lead on this one.
Okay, go for it.
Yeah, it was I knew early on that we were going to have to do some vocal processing in this series for the gods specifically. And one thing that, was always in the back of my mind is, yes, we need to make them sound imposing, but intelligibility is going to be at the forefront. We have to be able to understand what they say. And with Khonshu, first off, you're hearing him disembodied just as a voice that Steven's hearing. And then later on, when you actually see him, there's no, mouth movement. So that gave us a lot of freedom. But it took a lot of experimenting. We really had to wait until we got F. Murray Abraham's voice to start playing with it. And I tried all kinds of different tricks, trying to settle on what was going to sound the best. And it took a couple weeks to really kind of figure out what was working and what wasn't working. And then we sent off a bunch of versions that were sort of our favorites to the picture department, and they reviewed them, and luckily they picked one pretty quickly, and that kind of stuck. We also, while we pitched down his voice a little bit, it really depended on the performance. There were times where he got very boomy with his voice, and we decided not to pitch it down very much. But ultimately, it was a pretty complicated process that then we had to also document for the foreign territories, so they knew exactly how to process Khonshu when it was recorded in all the different languages. So it ended up being instead of just a mono sound that goes down the center channel, it was processed as a stereo sound, but then in the mix was spread between almost all the channels, including the subwoofer, to really make him feel big and imposing. But there were times where after he was kind of established, we glued him a little more to the screen in the left, center, right, and not had him as much in the surrounds. But it's been fun hearing all the reactions that people have hearing Khonshu and getting the reactions from that.
Yeah. I just wondered, do you get to do a lot of voice work? Like, is it something that you typically would do on a series where you are putting voices through certain filters and through and synthesizers or whatever the word is? I'm sorry, apologies because I'm not a sound designer.
I don't know, it's fine.
But yeah, is that something unusual, or is it something that's pretty common?
I would say it's not incredibly unusual, but it's also not super common. It's somewhere in between. It's definitely not something we do on every project, but periodically it comes up. More often, there's a creature or a monster or an alien that requires more of a strict sound design approach with vocalizations. This is a creature that's been developed in concept art and then visual effects, and you see its mouth open. It's terrifying, but they need something brand new in there, so we're pulling sounds from different animals and different recordings. So that's a lot more common, at least from what I've experienced, probably for you too, Tim, than actually processing dialogue.
Well, and this show had a bit of that as well. I mean, with Amit and a lot of those creatures, that they had a number of non-human sounds. Some of the priests had some non-human stuff, but again, that's another example of a character where, I mean, so much of it comes from, if you can get a great vocal performance from an actor, it can really make or break something where you need to create a unique, specific voice. I mean, a lot of, with something like Moon Knight or Conscious, you really need an organic sound, and if you really process something too much, you can just it just doesn't sound natural anymore. So as much as we can to preserve that performance is just really such an important part of that process as well, and finding the right person to do that as well is very important.
Yeah, it's all about enhancing the story. You don't want to do too much that suddenly you're taking away from it and people are like, not thinking about what's happening.
That's right. Yeah,
it's really just all about immersing everybody.
Yeah, you don't want to take away from. You're there to support the story, push the narrative forward. You're not there to necessarily stand out, but of course you make such an impact. And if Conchu's voice is wrong or it's too robotic, it's too, I guess, fake, it takes us out of the story completely. So I found myself to be really immersed and really intimidated by him, and that was the point. I'd love to be able to. This is what I love talking to sound guys about, because you're working on so many projects. And especially if you're into Foley and you're a Foley artist or sound effects artist, how many things can you possibly come up with that are new? Are there always opportunities for something new and innovative, or have you run out of? You know what I mean? Like, surely you've come up with every sound under the sun, but I guess that can't be the case. Tim, what's the case? You tell me.
Every time you think that you have completely run the well dry, something inspires you, and sometimes it's as simple as somebody releases a new library you find interesting. Sometimes it's you're watching a TV show comes on and you're like, oh my god, listen to that, and it just inspiration can come from anywhere. I mean, sometimes it's like you go home and you open a can of dog food and you're like, oh my god, this is the sound I need. You never know what's going to happen, and so it's just you have to always be creatively open, and you never, definitely there's always those, there's fight scenes all the time. There's certain tropes that we do again and again, and that's part of the job too, is taking that inspiration and doing it new and fresh and trying to find ways to, even though the basic language, it's like, here's a blueprint for a house, just doesn't necessarily mean you have to, you still got to put in the walls and the art and the decorations and everything else. And that's where you really can get a lot of creativity.
Yeah. Like us film and TV nerds. I mean, I can't tell you how many videos I've watching Foley artists showing us how they come up with some sounds, like, something will come up on screen and it's like a cheese grater or it's a head of lettuce being smashed. Like, we live for that stuff just because it's so interesting for us to see the process. But I just wonder if can you think, Tim, maybe what was the most out there or left field source that you were able to come up with a really interesting sound on the show?
There's so many of them.
Where do I start?
I mean, I guess one of my favorite things is, I have, some of these giant explosions, sometimes it's just me walking around in my flip-flops.
Wow.
Well, and I have to give credit to sound designer Kim Patrick, because she really established Harrow's magic from the onset of the show with his cane. and she'd got the note from Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead in a spotting session that we're trying to figure out if there's a way that they could incorporate. She could incorporate some alligator sounds into Harrow's magic. So she did find some alligator hisses and growls that she processed and made that part of his sound. And you really hear a lot of that in episode 2, but then as the series goes on, and then especially in episode 6, his magic gets so much more powerful that suddenly it's so much more powerful that Tim was able to take some of that and make it so much bigger. So it was really cool to see that evolution of taking a sound that's established, but now that it's been released, it has to go to 11, so to speak.
Mac, I love the way you describe sound designers, editors, and re-recording mixers on your Twitter. They're really sound collage illusionists. You take audio from different sources, time frames, geographical locations, and you weave them together in seamless ways and create new sonic tapestries to tell stories. I couldn't have possibly come up with anything better. It's perfect. Do you find that you get a lot of questions from people about what do sound designers and editors and re-recording mixers actually do? Because we love the sound, but we don't quite understand the process, do we?
Sure. The other way that I like describing it to people, especially when they want to know the difference between editing and mixing, is I break it down in food terms. And everybody understands food. So think of a sound designer as a sous chef, where they're working in their home kitchen, but they have access to the pantry that has a million ingredients. They don't just have one kind of salt. They have 35 kinds of salt. They have, every kind of variation. And if we don't have it, we can go grow it, or we can go farm it. We go out and record it. And so then we're building these dishes based on, say a dish is like a scene in a show. We build the recipe of the dish, and we're building in our home kitchen. And once we're happy with it, we organize it in very specific, here are the spices, here are the starches, here are the proteins, and then we put it aside and we work on the next scene. So then when it comes time to the mix, we're presenting that recipe to the mixer. Well, now they're not in their home kitchen, they're in the fancy restaurant kitchen with the best appliances, the best cookware, the best tools, and they're taking our recipe and they're fine-tuning it and deciding which ingredients and how much of each. And then there are times that are why'd you put cumin in this recipe? Cumin's wrecking it. Get rid of the cumin. Give me turmeric instead. So, we get on our headphones and we find the different sound. And so they're refining it and making it just right, and then that's the final version that you hear in the whatever the movie or the TV show.
Yeah, I love that. I've never heard that before, but that is actually perfect. I might use that when someone asks me, "What does a sound person do?" I'm like, I don't know, but I'll tell you what I heard.
So we're finding all the bits, and then the mixers that's ultimately putting them together and making it work.
So there's two aspects, particularly for episode 6, because it's just so huge. I mean, every Marvel show I've ever seen, I've seen everything, that you always know the finale is going to be just mind-boggling. So firstly, it's making sure the mix is right, particularly with the score. And Hesham Nazir's score on this show is phenomenal. I had the pleasure of speaking to him the other day and told him that. I listen to it all the time. How much scope is there for collaboration or consultation between your teams and the composer to ensure that the sound design is going to be as seamless as possible? Who'd like to talk me through that?
Everything is moving so fast that it's really hard to collaborate with a composer. We try to find the bits when we can. There are times in the mix where we may try something. There's an example in episode 1 when the museum is closing down, and Stephen hears the dog whimpering. The score had many more layers in there, and in some ways it was kind of sort of playing what was happening a little too early. And so Bonnie Wild, who was my co-supervising sound editor, and she mixed a bunch of the episodes for Moon Knight, she was able to kind of rework by like pulling down some layers of Hashem's score to really allow the creepiness of the museum and those little tiny, jackal sounds to like really pop up. And it's amazing how just those subtle changes can totally change the dynamic of the story. So in some ways that, while we weren't collaborating early on about that, it was just kind of like finding a way for both things to work correctly. And then there was an example in episode 5 where after the memory of the cave and the brother getting stuck in the cave, he comes back out into the Mark walks into the door in the psych ward, and it's the Shiva. Suddenly everything's very quiet. You hear just people whispering and the dishes, and then when young Mark comes down the stairs, the camera turns to the mom, and she looks up, and there was something that I had created for the movie Haunt, a horror movie directed and written by Scott Beck and Brian Woods, that I loved and ended up getting dumped. And I resurrected that piece and I pitched it to work right with Hashem's score. So it's almost a seamless transition of like, you see like the mom, like she's getting really upset with Mark, and in the Avid, they had put in a swarming bees, but this element that I had in there kind of gave the same feeling, but it was much more sort of crafted, and then it just seamlessly went right into Hashem's score to the point where you wouldn't be able to tell what his sound design and what score, and that was sort of a happy accident, fun moment.
In the finale, I know a lot of it was such, as you mentioned, a huge episode with so much going on, and the score was just fantastic and just bombastic in there. And that actually, one of the big issues with the finale was trying to find those balances, that we were doing this, ballet of handing off back and forth to each other and not having too many sounds that might crowd, and trying to find, the right sound that would cut through and that you could hear and grab your attention and get your ear and then get out of the way. So that was something we spent a lot of time with. Scott Lewis was mixing that, and just he coordinated with me a number of times on, hey, we've got these sounds, but let's try to find something a little more with a little more character, a little more distinction, to help really, so that our ear can be drawn to it, and then have more of that ballet dance, really, that you get.
Yeah, if you pay attention to that fight, as soon as Moon Knight kind of lands, grabs Harrow off the pyramid, and they come crashing into the streets, that whole like series of the fight then with Layla also, it is like so very precise. Like you're hearing that, then you're hearing that, then you're hearing that, and it's so easy to get too much in there where it suddenly confuses your brain, but there's just enough sound and the right sound that it just totally directs your eye where you need to see to follow all the action. And yeah, Tim and Leo Marcel and Terry Ecton did a really great job through all that.
It was, honestly, that finale was so huge, and everybody just brought such, amazing work on that. Really do have to, I'm representing Terry and Leo here, but we can't, hats off to them so much for all their amazing efforts. They just really knocked it out of the park.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had a great team.
Because to finish up, sometimes it's the less is more approach. People think sound is about the loudest series or the loudest film. It's not. It's about where to put the sound and where to draw the attention and how to propel the narrative. And you guys did such an incredible job on this show. I'm so grateful we got to chat about it. You should be very proud. And thank you so much, both of you, for your time today.
Thank you so much, Robert.
Thank you.